3 powerful motivations to close zero down deals. Hello, everyone. My name is Tessa. I'm here to introduce you to your host of the Futurist Mindset Show, who is Reagan Rodriguez. Reagan is a futurist who teaches stratosphere wealthy legacy families how to become impact investors. Hi, Reagan. How are you?
I am doing better than I deserve. How about yourself, Tessa?
The same. I love when you say that because it's very, very true.
That's
So
right. We didn't have a choice on where we were born, so I am doing much better than I deserve.
exactly. Well, because we've been talking about this over the last couple weeks, right?
Yeah,
So this is all kind of ties together.
it does. I that's how I picked the topic today. I like getting feedback, which I do from a lot of you that watch and or other acquaintances or friends that I know that ask me what are some specific ways that I can get involved um, in acquiring businesses to then grow my business. So based on the feedback that I've gotten, plus I spoke to a few key people this week that gave me a lot of experiences that they've done, real stories that they've done. So I'm going to kind of get into that. As we've talked about over the last few weeks, I've maybe these weren't my exact words, but I've what I have conveyed to you is that you don't make money by running the business, you make it when you sell the business. So you can, and I also kind of talked about how you may have a small business right now, and that's fine. In order to grow it, you may buy another one that's even smaller and then another, and then you exit it. And so the purpose of that, Tessa, is that you started off small, then you bought a bigger business and then a bigger business, and eventually you'll get to one that'll go global. With what I'll go over, you'll see how it's not too good to be true. It takes a little bit more work that you have to talk to a lot of people. So let me mention this. You can read books, you can go to seminars on merger and acquisitions, and what you're really going to get is they're going to say, have the right accountants, have the right lawyers, maybe hire a good business broker. And I say flush all that because all of that costs money, right? So what I'm going to do instead of just give you maybe some practical advice based on personal experiences and personal experiences of friends of mine as well, which I got a lot of good tips today. I'm smiling because I talked about my friend Fabiola, and she did watch our uh, show last week, and she's been dealing with a little bit of a sickness. So I think I told you that like last week, it was a few minutes before here, and I called and said, hey, I just want to get your advice on something. And I knew she hadn't been feeling real well. So I had sent a text the next day and I said, by the way, I want to run something by you. Give me a quick call. And she says, yes, Regan, I'm feeling much better today. Did you forget to ask?
Hmm.
Man, like you knew I was sick, you knew I wasn't feeling well, but you thought to ask, am I feeling better today? So I really did think of something else I wanted to ask. And I called her about 15 minutes because before we jumped on. So I thought just one tip. Well, she didn't call back. And I texted her and I said, oh, by the way, you feeling better today?
Aw.
She watches this. She's like, that's why you were calling. So no, but I did get some good advice by somebody that we both know that's in the UK, and he was in the telecom industry. Specifically, also, we're talking about internet service providers, Tessa. So what he was telling me is that years ago, there were actually only two internet service providers in the UK. It was called CallNet and Vodafone, and he used one of the two. And he was in that uh, phone, when I say phone, the phone system business. I realize I'm dating myself because now we don't
Nope,
have
that was
those. But
very
do you remember those days where there were
yeah.
those phone systems that were very, very expensive?
Yes.
And I don't know if, did you know people that worked in sales selling phone systems?
I did. I do. I
And
still
they go
do.
through a lot of numbers, don't they, Tessa?
They do.
Yeah, that's probably why you're smiling, because you know that it's like hardcore cold calling. I mean, they're going door to door because I don't know how long they last, right? 10, 15 years. And then when they do need to get replaced, then that's when they look for people. So that's why I think the strategy is these salespeople just go like door to door, hoping that they catch that person at the right time when their phone system's going down. So think about it. If your business is only netting 20,000 a year and you want to expand that, you've got to talk to so many people to then find one customer. And then
Right.
I'm novice. I don't know about that industry. You may know more about it, but it's not that they make so much money off the phone system. It's then the ongoing, just like on an
Subscription.
internet provider,
Yes.
right? So when you think about it, if you were to advertise or hire a salesperson, you're going to go through a lot of numbers just to make one sale. Then you've got to pay that person. And in reality, you're only making money on the monthly. So what he decided to do was, as a way to grow his business, and again, he wasn't making money. That's a very important part for me to mention because a lot of people, they hear about these strategies and they'll say, yeah, but you still need money. Or they'll say, gosh, these are great strategies that Reagan's given me, but if I only had money to put a little bit more down, more than the dollar down or 10 pounds or whatever. So here's what he did. He didn't have a lot of money. Instead, he thought he'd go around and talk to other competitors and say, hey, I'm an investor. I look at acquiring businesses. Have you thought of selling? And from there, you, well, he didn't have the right strategies. He thought he would then look at the business and then talk it down. So he found somebody, and what he did was he found those three pressing needs, those motivations. Okay. And I'd like to say if you find the perfect storm is if you can, is if that seller, if you can find I guess what I'm wanting to say is the perfect storm of what motivates for selling. That's what I'm wanting to say. And this friend of mine did exactly that. Number one, a ticking time bomb. You guys notice on the image that Tessa downloaded here, it had a ticking time bomb. So this guy had a ticking time bomb. Here's what it was. He had a lease agreement, and the lease was about to expire. And the landlord was going to bulldoze it and turn it into apartments. So this made him kind of furious, right? He had to look for space, but he also needed money. So here's what then happened. He asked the guy, well, what are you wanting to sell for? And the guy said 70,000, which he didn't have 70,000. So then he did one of the things I suggested, which is just ask him for the numbers. So looked at the numbers, and here's what they found out. The guy was only netting 20,000 a year. So he's like, you want 70,000? Well, I've got equipment, I've got debt. I don't need all of that stuff. I don't want to. Well, look, I need 20,000, the guy says, because you don't understand. I have to move. And to move from here to the next location is going to cost money. And then when I do find that other location, I got to put first down in security deposit. Well, this friend of mine didn't have that problem because he already had the business. True, his business wasn't making a lot of money, and at the moment he didn't have a lot, but he didn't have to worry about the moving cost. He didn't have to worry about putting first less in security deposit. But there's no way he was going to pay 70,000. Business isn't worth that. He doesn't have the money, right? So the other thing that was frustrating this person is that the internet service provider was changing. So changing the goalpost kind of thing. And that was getting frustrating. Think back, I think when I was a little boy and you put together these blocks, when you're like in kindergarten and then somebody punches them down and you're like, okay, and you put your blocks back up and and then somebody knocks them down again. I mean, after the third or fourth time, you're going to get a little frustrated, right? So that's what happened with this guy. just done with all the changes in his provider, right? It was frustrating. So the other situation, which was the third thing that he realized, this was the motivation, how business owners have that shiny coin syndrome. You know what I mean by that? I have it too, where I call it monkey see shiny coin. And that
Yeah.
was the other thing that this person had. He had another business idea, and the other idea, or this other side hustle that he loved more than the old business. So I like to call it that idea that the person gets in the shower. And as I've shared with you, I get a lot of ideas, but it doesn't mean that you implement on all of them. Tessa, you know this because you've even seen the back end of my uh, on Bluehost that I sometimes do buy quite a bit of domains. And I know there's times that you're like, gosh, I've seen that you've got this one that you bought and you buy. Yeah, that's my idea. I get in the shower and then I get it and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so great. I've got to buy the domain because someone may steal this idea. And then the next morning, I'd say to myself, maybe it wasn't that great of an idea. That's okay. I just spent a little bit on a domain. I didn't incorporate. I didn't, right? So this person, that was that. They had this other idea. That other idea they kind of liked a lot more. So he found those three motivations. So once you find that, ticking time bomb was number right,
Right.
the lease agreement, the fact that their service provider was changing and he didn't want to have to go through that nightmare. But the other friend of mine didn't mind because he didn't have as many customers. So he was going to get a bunch of free customers and then convert them over. Now, the other thing is, when I was young, I used to network with a lot of accountants, attorneys, and I would ask them those questions. If you were to buy a business, what would be done? What's the work that needs to, what's the asset purchase agreement? And what I later realized is for small businesses like this that maybe aren't doing well, it doesn't make sense to do an asset purchase agreement. My analogy is it's like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It just, no, you don't need that. All you need is just a letter of intent. What does that mean? It could mean an email exchange going back and forth.
Got it.
Okay. So this person then said, I want, since you said you're not willing to pay 70, but I told you at net and you found out at net's 20, fine, then give me 15,000. Well, this friend of mine didn't have 15. So the guy came back and says, all right, I'll tell you what, let's do 10. Then the guy came back and said, let's do 5,000. Well, this friend of mine said, and this is important for all of you to understand, I'm glad I didn't have the money. He said, because if I did, I would have given him the 5,000. Just like you've mentioned to me before that you've been burned before in the past where someone says, I'll give you equity. So this guy was so grateful he didn't put 5,000 down. I said, how much did you have in the bank? He said, I had 2,000. But he had to pay his bills too, right?
Right.
Well, guess what? The guy then said, I'll take 2,000. He wasn't going to do it, although he had it. That would have been everything he had, right? This
Right.
guy's like, the only way this will work is $1 down. The guy didn't have any other buyers. And he's got some other gig he's doing that he's more excited about. So what did they do? What they negotiated was $1 down. I will work on all the customers that you have and pending ones you're working on. I'll sign them up and we'll split it 50-50. Now, what ended up, remember, the strategy is buying more businesses, lumping them together, and then doing a big exit strategy. So this was a much better deal than even if he would have given them half down.
Right.
understand what he did. So a good analogy would be, I'm just going to give one that maybe you could relate with or others. You build websites. That's not all you do, but you also build websites for people. So let's assume that somebody offered you another, or I'm going to give an example of something I'm passionate about. Let's say on the side you had this creative bug where you played guitar and music and bars on the side, right? And that was your side hustle and your passion. And then somebody discovers you and says, "How would you like to play full time to do this? And you could do this, but you're only going to make this much." And you say, "Gosh, it's about what I make doing my boring business that I don't like. And now I'll get to do what I'm passionate about and I'm going to make the same amount." And you say, "You know what? Maybe I should sell my business," but you don't really have much of a business because what you make, you spend. And
Right.
meaning you pay your bills, so it wouldn't show that it's netting much. Okay, so let's give an example. I just thought of an example because I have my hand up. Five. You've got five people that want you to build a website. And let's just assume, I'm just going to give this number, that you charge exactly 5,000. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Well, you know this, that 25,000 is not going to be your net because you've got
Right.
expenses, you've got programmers, you've got designers that you've got to do. I don't know what your margins are. We're not here to discuss that, but you're not going to net all 25,000
Right.
on that. Okay. So you'd say, "Well, I've got five that I could potentially do, but you know what? It would take time away in the evenings when I get to play in that band or play the guitar, and those are my passions. I'd rather do that." So a girlfriend comes to you that you know, let's just say at church that you know, and she wants to do what you do, but she doesn't have the money and wouldn't know how to get started. And so she'd say, "I'd love to buy something that already kind of has momentum versus
Right.
starting from
Clients and
scratch." And,
exactly.
and, and let's just assume that this gal that didn't have money had a wealthy uncle that said, "If you find a business and it makes sense, then I'll help." Okay. Well, and you know me, that wealthy uncle's the type that somehow gets a hold of me. And
Right.
they say, "Reagan, I've got this niece. I really want to help out." And I really do get calls like that. "What do you suggest?" I go, "You don't want to mess things up. Don't put anything down." So here's what I would do. I wouldn't recommend what this friend of mine in the UK did, which is start negotiating down. Mm-mm. Start with zero and let them tell you why. So in that example, you might say, "I've got five potential people that say they want to, but the deal hasn't been closed, but they're going to." Then you'd say to that friend, "You take over. If you close all five of those, then we split it 50-50." Now that's a good deal for both people
Mhm.
because you just got a free salesperson or a free person that's managing that you didn't have to pay, and they're thinking like a business owner, not a
Right.
manager, which means they're going to be bringing in more business. And when they do, you get 50% of that too. Because remember, you're not giving them everything. You don't know if they have the ability to close those five. You don't know if they're going to do. So you're going to wait until they do that, you wait until that full year. So you understand how you
Yeah.
can do that with business. You can do the same thing with landscaping. Somebody has 8 to 10 accounts that they cut grass for. Let's assume they're commercial properties. And the person ends up getting some other job as a landscape architect, which was what he always wanted to do. He's like, "You know what? I'm not going to have him to work on the weekends or the evenings like I do now. I'm going to be making a little bit more, but I also don't want to walk away with that business that has taken me 5 years for
Hmm.
those 10 accounts." Well, it's easy to find somebody that would love to get into that landscaping business that says, "Well, I'm trying to get into the business, but what I do is I'm going door to door and talking to people." They say, "We already have someone that does our landscaping."
Right.
So now that person can take over. And now I would recommend if that person that was wanting to sell that landscaping business, I would say you do have assets. You've got versus zero down, they got to pay for the lawnmower. If you've got a truck that they're doing, you got to do something. The guy's got to put something down because there is assets. Now, if
Mm-hmm.
that person already owned that and had all that equipment, okay, then fine. Then it would just be a seller financing. But I think what I want everyone to understand is don't walk away from that business. And if you have a business that takes a while before you bring in customers or clients, there could be another strategy. Like this friend of mine in the UK, instead of going door to door saying, "Do you need a new phone system? Do you need a new phone system?" He thought, you know what? I have to go through 100 people to maybe make one sale. Or I can contact 20 competitors and say, "Have you thought of an exit strategy?" And four will say yes. Two
That's
might be the ones you can negotiate with, and one will do a zero down deal. So I'm going to close with this that I was thinking. Here's what I want you to learn about what I shared, that you're not running a marathon to grow your business. Okay. You can run the last 10 yards and you still get the medal. And you're going to do that by acquiring businesses as a growth strategy. And it is possible to grow by a year's worth of sales, as I gave that example, in maybe just that afternoon. Okay, so what my objective was today is that I hope that I forced you to think more strategically, more like an investor or a shareholder. I hope that today you had an epiphany. And that epiphany was that you dismantled everything that you believed to be true. Okay, meaning about buying businesses. Okay, now what's happened is you have now found a hack for value creation that does not involve blood, sweat, and tears.
mm-hmm. I love it. Well, thank you, Regan. That was amazing. And I really don't have a lot of questions on
Oh,
today's.
yeah.
I think you did a great job with your examples and everything. It was so clear. But if you're curious about, the exit process for your business, definitely reach out to Regan. You can actually follow and subscribe by hitting the bells on the screen for YouTube, or you can reach out to Regan at Fifth Avenue Capital. It's 5THAAVC.com. And it's in the post. So you can just click through to the website and book a time.